Hi, good to see you again. Welcome to Block 1, Constructing, Measuring, and Using Geometric Notation, Lesson 6. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to measure angles up to 180 degrees using your protractor and, of course, pencil and a ruler. So in this lesson, you're still going to need those tools. So if you have not got them, pause the video and go and get your pen, so your ruler and your protractor. And of course, rubber, because if you make mistake, you should be able to rub off your mistake and start all over again. So in today's lesson, you're going to learn how to draw angles up to 180 degrees. Remember to like the video, share the video with those you think can benefit, subscribe to the channel and click on the notification bell so that when new videos are released, you will be notified. By doing so, you help us grow our mission of providing a platform where children can have high quality maths education provided they have internet access, regardless of their economic situation. So the charitable work that you or someone can do is to provide internet access to a child you think can benefit from this education program. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to pause video and answer the retrieval practice questions in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the retrieval practice questions, here are the answers. So for the first one, you were asked, give an example of an acute angle. So you could have given any number that satisfy this condition. So an acute angle is greater than 0 but less than 90 degrees. So you could have given any number. Number 2, Jack says that the size of angle X is 45 degrees. Of course, we can see it's not 45 degrees. Jack has read the outside scale, but we can see that the angle is obtuse. The vertex and the line that lines up with 0, the line segment that lines up with 0 of one of the line segments of the angle is the inside scale. So it is clearly not 45 degrees. Next, how many degrees are equal to half a turn? So remember our previous lesson, a turn is 360 degrees, so half a turn is 180 degrees. Let's do some new learning for our lesson for today. If you're asked to draw an angle of 25 degrees, do you know how you would approach this? Oh well, you may have thought right, but let's do our practice for this lesson. So you would position the crosshair of your protractor at the end of the line. Next, you would mark 25 degrees. Now you can see that your zero line, the zero line segment of the protractor starts here. So you'll mark 25 degrees. You take off the protractor and you take a ruler and you draw from the end of the line where you measured your angle. You draw a line to connect with the point that you have marked for 25 degrees. And that gives you your angle. And of course, do not forget that you can mark the angle on your diagram. So you can mark that. You can write 25 degrees. Okay, so you're allowed to do that. In fact, it is good to do that so that anyone that sees your diagram would know exactly the angle you have drawn. But that is not the only way we could have done it. We could have measured from the right-hand side of the line. So we could position the crosshair of the protractor at the right end of the line and then use our outside scale. In this case, we would mark our point there and then we'll use a ruler to join the right end of the line to the point that we marked for 25 degrees. And of course, do not forget to mark your angle like I have done above here. That is also not the only way. Remember, the angles are drawn above the line. We could also draw, when we change the orientation of the protractor, we could draw the angles below the line on the right or below the line on the left. The angles would still be right and valid. What about this? If you've been asked to draw an angle ABC of 150 degrees, can you spot the mistake? Now, remember, when we draw our angles, we must make sure that the crosshairs of the protractor lines up with the vertex of the angle. Now, the vertex of the angle is defined by the middle letter. Remember how we label angles? So, but that is not what has happened here. So we should really shift the protractor so that that should not be acute, because if we use this method, we would get the wrong answer. So the protractor should shift to the vertex because the middle letter defines the vertex of your angle. And that's what we've been doing. So you must stick to that rule. Okay, it's now time for you to pause the video and do some practice. So get your protractor, get your pencil, and get your ruler. Here you're asked to draw the angles and to use the given lines as part of your angle. Now, you may have done this. I'm just going to discuss the answer real quick, how you could have done this. So 180 degrees, you would place your protractor. So I'm going to be working from the left side of the line. So which means you'll be using your outside scale, okay? Because the protractor goes that way. Your inside scale. So working from the left side of the line. So you position the protractor here, and then you measure 80 degrees, and then you connect your line. So it will be somewhere something like that, because it should be less than 90 degrees. Okay. This one, 120 degrees, you use your scale, you position your 0, the crosshair of the protractor at the end of the line, and then you measure with your angle and then your protractor, and then your angle will be something like that, 108.20 degrees. 35 degrees will be something like that, and then 163 degrees will be something like that. Okay. All right. So making sure you've used your protractor properly and you've, worked hard to do this so you can check your answers. Pause the video and answer question 2 in Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 2, here are the answers. So here you were asked, Dexter is asked to draw an angle of 30 degrees. He marks a point as shown. Here is what Dexter has done. What mistake has Dexter made? So he has used the wrong scale of the protractor. So remember, we have checked this again and again and again. It's really important that you use the correct scale of the protractor and you use your knowledge of knowing what the angle should look like if it is acute, obtuse, or reflex. But reflex would be dealing with that in our subsequent lessons. Okay, let's do some new learning. Here, she says you can draw angles on horizontal lines only. Do you agree with Whitney? Have a think. Of course, no, because we can have the orientation of our protractor in different ways. So you can see we can draw our angles in that orientation, we can draw in that orientation, or even in this orientation. What matters is making sure that the crosshair of your protractor lines up with the vertex of the angle you are drawing, okay, with the end of the line. And then you draw your angle, making sure your protractor is put in the correct orientation so that the zero line of the protractor after the crosshair of the protractor is at the end of the line lines up with the line segment, and then you can indicate your angle and then use a ruler to connect the end of the line from where you measured your angle to the points that you marked. It's now time for you to practice. Pause the video and answer question 3 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 3, here are the answers. So here you were asked, draw angles of 100 degrees, use the given line to form part of the angle. So if we were going to draw this, I'm going to use this one. You could position the crosshair of your protractor here, making sure it lines up with 0. You can either measure that in that direction or that direction, or you could even measure from the top. So, but let me focus on here. We know if we're using, for example, our inside scale, we know 90 degrees would look like this. So when we finish measuring our 100 degrees, the angle should look about like that. Okay. Then for this one, if we position, the crosshair at this end of the line, the crosshair of our protractor, we know that 90 degrees would look like this. So by the time we finish measuring our 100-degree angle, it should look like this, slightly bigger than 90 degrees. Okay, so check that you have done yours correctly, and then mark and celebrate your success. Mark your work and celebrate your success. Pause the video and answer question 4 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 4, here are the answers. So for question 4, you were asked to draw two 45-degree angles. Each angle should be in a different orientation. So to do that, you could draw a horizontal line, any horizontal line, and draw a vertical line. So we know that your 90-degree angle would look like this. So using the crosshair of your protractor and that lining up with 0, when you finish measuring, your angle should be about halfway like that, looking like that. So that's one orientation. Another orientation could be when it's vertical, okay? So putting the crosshair of your protractor, let's say we're doing it from the top, and then you line it up with 0, 90 degrees is going to look like this. So when you finish measuring, you should have that, okay? So your angle, that should be 45 degrees. So we have achieved what we were asked to do, which is to use different orientations to show 45-degree angles. So check your work and celebrate your success and mark your work. Okay, let's do some new learning for the third part of the lesson. Here is a question. ABC is an isosceles triangle. I'm sure you know what that means. It means the two sides of the triangle would be equal. Okay. AC is 4 centimeter. Interior angles, you can see how angles are indicated. Interior angles BAC, not the middle letter is where the angle is. Remember, is equal to angle BCA. So that is another thing you need to know about isosceles triangles. The two sides will be equal, and the base angles where the two sides rest would be equal. And that's why we've been told this. We've been asked to make an accurate drawing of triangle ABC. Well, the first thing we do is we mark a point and call it A. We've been told that AC is 4 centimeter. So we're going to take our ruler and draw 4 centimeter and mark the end of that line segment C. We're going to take a ruler and join both points. The next thing is for us to draw angle BAC. So remember, the middle letter tells you where the vertex will be or where the angle is going to be positioned. So the crosshair of our protractor has to be at end A. Now we want to measure 75 degrees. So we can see that the zero line is lined up with the line segment and it's the inside scale. So we're going to mark 75 degrees. We'll take a ruler and we join those points. We draw it as long as we need it to be. We have not been told how long we need to make the line. So we really don't have to be restricted here. Next, we want to measure angle BCA because we're told that that is also 75 degrees. So we'll position our crosshair at the end of that line segment. Remember, the middle letter tells you where the vertex is of the angle. So this time, we want to measure the angle. Remember, we want to form a triangle. So we're not going to be using the inside scale. We're going to be using the outside scale because that is the side that will make the angle form pointing in that direction. So this time we'll mark 75 degrees and then we'll use a ruler to join the end of that line segment from C, passing the point that we have marked. Again, we'll draw it as long as we need it to be until it meets the other line. Now we can mark that point B because we have just completed our triangle. And we can mark our angles. But how can we check the accuracy of our drawing? Well, we know we got these right. So we know these are 75 degrees. That's my mistake. Sorry about those lines. We know these are 75 degrees. And we know that the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180 degrees. So it means these two added together is 150 degrees. So 180 degrees minus 150 degrees should be equal to 30 degrees. So we could use our protractor to check this angle to see that it is actually 30 degrees. That is how we can check the accuracy of our drawing. Okay, let's look at another one. I want you to pause the video and try this out yourself. Assuming you've paused the video and you've tried this out, here are the answers. So here you ask Eva is standing at point P. So here is labeled A, but it should really be P, okay? So sorry about that. So that should be P. So Eva is standing at point P, facing north. She turns anti-clockwise 53 degrees and walks 200 meters to point B. Okay. We've been asked to use a scale of 1 centimeter being equal to 25 meters to draw an accurate sketch of a journey. So we know that we're going to have to position our protractor here and measure 53 degrees anti-clockwise. So you can see why we have done the orientation here, why the crosshair has been put at the end of the point line for P, why we've used the inside scale, because going anti-clockwise 53 degrees is acute and it has to go in that direction. Okay, so we mark 53 degrees because that will be the anti-clockwise direction. We use a ruler to join it, but we can draw it as long as we need to. Because remember, we do not know how long our line is going to be when we have to mark 200 meters using this scale. So let's use our scale and see what happens. We know that 1 centimeter is equal to 25 meters. That's what we've been told. So it means for every 25 meters that Eva walks in real life on the ground, we can use 1 centimeter of our ruler measurement. So what that means is that 25 meters scaling up to 200 meters, it's 8 times. So it means we're going to have to use 8 centimeter to represent 200 meters that Eva has walked, which means this line could be as long as 8 centimeters. So we'll position our ruler there and mark 8 centimeter, and of course call that point B. You do not need to rub off the other excess part of the line. You can just leave it, provided you have marked point B accurately. You're just fine. Okay, here is what Teddy says. You can only draw angles at the end of line segments. Do you agree? Of course not. Here is an example. Here, you can see that we have line segment EG, but within that line segment, we have defined another vertex. Remember, vertex is important to draw your angle F. So when we drew this angle, we would have positioned the crosshair of our protractor at F and would have used our, I think, inside scale. Yes, inside scale to measure 28 degrees. Okay, so Teddy is not right. We can draw, angles at any point where the vertex is defined. We just need to make sure we position the crosshair of our protractor at that point and decide to use either the inside scale or the outside scale depending on what angle we need to draw. It's now time for you to pause the video and practice what you've learned. Pause the video and answer questions 5 and 6 in 4 minutes. Assuming you've paused video and answered the question, here is what your answer should look like. So here, your orientation is different. So it's exactly like the example we did, but here you're going to need a vertical line, okay? Making sure the line is 3 centimeters. You're going to position one of the crosshair of the protractor here, and then you're going to measure 75 degrees. You draw the line as long as you can. You're going to position another the crosshair of the protractor here, and you measure 75 degrees. You will find that they will meet, and then you would have drawn the drawing correctly. Here you are asked to draw the angles, angle PRQ to be 37 degrees. So remember, the middle letter tells you the position of the angle, okay? So if we're drawing angle PRQ, we know first you can just do a rough sketch, okay, my angle is going to look like this, R is going to be here, P is going to be here, and of course, Q is going to be here. So having that rough sketch, you can just draw a simple line. You're not being told how long the line will look like. So you can just say, okay, draw a line, you mark it, you call that point R, and then you call that Q, position the crosshair of, your protractor here, and you measure 37 degrees, okay, and you call the other point P. Okay, you can do the same here. First, before you draw it, you can sketch, the angle. All right, you can say, well, 156 degrees. Okay, that has to be obtuse. All right, it's less than 180, but it's greater than 90. So first you sketch it, you say, okay, the middle letter is where the angle is going to be. So you can say, okay, but it's going to be bigger than 90 degrees. So you say, okay, let's sketch it out first before you do the actual drawing so that you have an idea of what you're doing. So you say, okay, y is going to be here, all right? The other end of the line can be z. So x is going to look like this, okay? So it's going to be more than 90 degrees. 90 would be this position here. So you say, okay, this is going to be x. So you have a rough idea, you've made a guess of what it's going to look like. And then you can take your protractor, you produce a line, it could be a really short line. You call this point Z, you call this X, you position the Y. You position the crosshair of the protractor here, and then you use your protractor, you do your measurements, you put the point, mark the point where you've measured 156 degrees, then use your ruler to join the vertex Y to the point X, and that will give you your accurate drawing. All right, let's look at this one. Pause video and answer this question in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the question, here is the answer. Let's discuss them. Here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Okay, so here you're asked, Tom is trying to find some treasure. He starts at the point marked with a cross. So he starts here. Okay. He is facing north. So you can see the north line on the map, the north, indicator. He turns through 135 degrees clockwise and walks 125 meters. Now, take note, you've been given a scale here. You've been told that 1 centimeter should be 50 meters. So if he is walking 125 meters, one way to find out how many centimeters you're going to use is to do 125 divided by 50 to find out how many centimeters you're going to use to represent 125 meters. All right, so you do this real quick. So once you've done that, so I'm going to just talk you through what you're going to do. So you now have, and what you're going to use in centimeters to represent this. So now you have to draw the angle. So remember, to do this, draw a knot line on the position where Tom is. And then you've been told that he turns through 135 degrees clockwise. So you place your protractor crosshair here, and then you make sure that your zero line lines up with this north line. Okay. Then you measure 135 degrees, which would look something like this. So it's going to be more than 90 degrees. 90 is this here. Then what you need to do is, using the length that you have got here, you then draw that length along that angle that you've measured. Okay, so first you're going to draw the line as long as you want after you've marked it. So you draw that as long as you want. Then after you've done that, when you've got this length that you've got, you then mark it here. All right. Then next, so let's say you've marked, you found it and you've marked it. Then the next thing you need to do, let's say that's where you marked, you've, done your measurement correctly. Then you say, then next, he then turns through 135 degrees clockwise and walks 200 meters. So from this point here where you've marked, you put another knot line. So do it properly with a ruler so you get it correctly. Then you measure another 135 degrees. So remember, this is 90 degrees. All right. So you measure 135 degrees. Let's say he does that again. Okay. And then you measure the equivalent of 200 meters in centimeters. So again, you do 200 divided by 50 because we've been told that 1 centimeter is equal to 50 meters. So this will obviously be 4. Okay, 4 centimeter. All right. So you now draw 4 centimeter. My pen is moving. Let's wait for it to settle. Okay. You then draw 4 centimeter. First, you would have drawn that as long as you wanted. So now you mark 4 centimeter, and then Tom digs the treasure. So you've been asked to work out where the treasure is, and that is where the treasure would be. So after you've done that, you should get your answer. Okay. Now, question 8, you were asked to make your own treasure hunt using a map in question 7. So you could have done a screenshot, printed it out, and then work with a friend to do your own treasure map and discuss it with your friend. So that brings us to the end of our lesson. So well done for learning how to draw angles up to 180 degrees, having a really good amount of practice. Until next time, take really good care of yourself, and bye bye.